Hello everyone, and welcome back. I'm Maya, and I'm so happy you're here today. Whether you're listening on your way to work, during your lunch break, while studying, or simply relaxing at home, thank you for spending this time with me. Today's episode is all about something that can completely transform your career, your confidence, and the way people perceive you in the workplace. We're talking about professional English. Now, when people hear the phrase professional English, they often imagine complicated vocabulary, formal expressions, and words that sound like they belong in a corporate textbook. But that's not what professional English really is. Professional English is not about sounding smart. It's not about using the biggest words in the dictionary, and it's definitely not about speaking perfectly. Professional English is about communicating clearly, respectfully, and confidently. It's about knowing what to say when you're speaking to a colleague, a manager, a client, or even someone you've just met for the first time at work. And here's something interesting. Many people spend years learning English. They study grammar, they memorize vocabulary, they watch movies, they read books. But when they enter a professional environment, they suddenly feel nervous. Why? Because workplace communication is different. The English you use with friends is not always the English you use in a meeting. The English you use at home is not always the English you use when sending an important email. And that's exactly what we're going to explore today. Throughout this episode, I'm going to walk you through an entire professional workday. Imagine that you're starting a new job. It's your first week. You want to make a good impression. You want to sound professional. You want to feel confident. But you're not always sure what to say. Together, we're going to go through those situations one by one. And by the end of this episode, you'll have a much clearer idea of how professional English is actually used in real life. So let's begin. Imagine your alarm goes off at 6:30 in the morning. You wake up, you get ready for work. Maybe you're a nurse. Maybe you're an office administrator. Maybe you're an engineer, a teacher, an accountant, or someone working remotely from home. No matter what your profession is, the workday starts long before you arrive at your desk. And something very important happens before you even speak to another person. Your mindset. One of the biggest mistakes English learners make is believing they must speak perfectly before they can speak confidently. But confidence doesn't come after speaking. Confidence comes from speaking. Think about that for a moment. Many people wait until they feel confident before they start speaking English. But confidence is actually the result of practice. Every confident English speaker you know has made mistakes. Lots of mistakes. The difference is that they kept going. So before you walk into your workplace, I want you to remember a simple sentence. My goal is communication, not perfection. Let me say that again. My goal is communication, not perfection. This mindset can change everything. Now let's imagine you've arrived at work. You walk through the door. You see your colleagues. This is one of the first opportunities to make a positive impression. Many learners know how to say, "Good morning." That's great. But professional communication often continues beyond those two words. Someone might ask, "How's your morning going? What have you got planned today? How are things?" And suddenly, some people freeze. Not because they don't understand, but because they don't know how to respond naturally. Let's talk about a few responses that sound professional and friendly. You could say, "My morning's going well so far. I'm doing well, thank you. It's been a busy start to the day. I'm just getting organized for today's tasks." Notice how these responses are simple. They're not complicated. Yet they sound polished and professional. And that's one of the secrets of workplace English. Simple language used confidently is often more effective than advanced language used nervously. I want you to remember that. Simple language, clear communication, professional tone. That's the winning combination. Now imagine you're settling into your workspace. Perhaps you're opening your emails, reviewing your schedule, checking your priorities. A colleague approaches you and asks, "Do you have a minute?" This phrase is extremely common in professional environments. When someone asks, "Do you have a minute?" they rarely mean exactly 60 seconds. They're simply asking whether you're available to talk. You might respond by saying, "Of course, sure, what can I help you with?" Absolutely. Or if you're busy, "I'm in the middle of something right now, but I'd be happy to help in about 10 minutes. Notice how polite and professional that sounds. You aren't rejecting the person, you're simply managing expectations. And that skill is incredibly important in the workplace. One reason people are perceived as professional is because they communicate clearly about their availability, their responsibilities, and their timelines. Now, let's talk about something that happens almost every single day at work. Working with other people. No matter what profession you're in, you're rarely working completely alone. You're communicating with colleagues. You're coordinating tasks. You're sharing information. You're solving problems together. And sometimes, that's where communication becomes challenging. Because workplace English isn't only about speaking. It's also about listening. In fact, one of the most underrated professional skills is being a good listener. Think about the people you enjoy working with. They're probably not the people who talk the most. They're the people who listen carefully, the people who make others feel heard, the people who ask thoughtful questions. And interestingly, becoming a better listener can also make you a better English speaker. Why? Because when you listen carefully, you begin noticing patterns. You notice how professionals phrase their ideas. You notice how they disagree politely. You notice how they ask for clarification. And over time, those patterns become part of your own communication style. Let me give you an example. Imagine a colleague is explaining a project to you. Halfway through their explanation, you realize you're confused. Many English learners panic in this situation. They worry that asking for clarification will make them appear incompetent. But the opposite is usually true. Professionals ask questions. Professionals seek clarity. Professionals make sure they understand before moving forward. Instead of staying silent, you can say, "Could you explain that one more time? Just to make sure I understand correctly. Could you walk me through that process again? Let me confirm that I've understood this correctly." These phrases are powerful because they demonstrate responsibility. They show that you care about accuracy. And accuracy is highly valued in every workplace. Now here's another situation. You've been assigned a task. You understand most of it, but one part isn't clear. Many people simply guess. And unfortunately, guessing often creates bigger problems later. A more professional approach is to ask questions early. You might say, "I understand the overall objective, but I'd like clarification on one detail." That's a beautiful professional sentence. Notice how confident it sounds. You're not saying, "I don't understand." You're saying, "I understand the overall objective," and then you're requesting clarification on a specific point. That small difference completely changes how the conversation feels. Now let's talk about another important workplace skill, giving updates. This happens everywhere. Managers ask for updates, team members ask for updates, clients ask for updates. And many English learners struggle because they don't know how to summarize their progress professionally. The good news? You don't need complicated vocabulary. You simply need structure. For example, "I've completed the first phase of the project. We're currently working on the next stage. Everything is progressing according to schedule." We've encountered a minor challenge, but we're working on a solution. Notice how calm and professional these statements sound. They're clear, they're concise, and most importantly, they're useful. One thing I've noticed over the years is that professional communication is often less about impressing people and more about helping people. Think about that. Many learners focus on sounding impressive, but successful professionals focus on being useful. When your communication helps others understand what's happening, you've already succeeded. Now let's imagine it's late morning. Your team has a meeting scheduled. For many people, meetings are the most stressful part of the workday. Even professionals with excellent technical skills sometimes feel nervous in meetings. Maybe you've experienced this yourself. You have an idea. You want to contribute, but you hesitate. You start thinking, what if my English isn't good enough? What if I make a mistake? What if people judge me? And while you're thinking, the conversation moves on. The opportunity disappears. If this sounds familiar, I want you to remember something. Most people in a meeting are not analyzing your grammar, they're thinking about their own work, their own responsibilities, their own deadlines. They're not sitting there waiting for you to make a mistake. In reality, they're usually focused on themselves. And that realization can be incredibly freeing. One of the easiest ways to participate in a meeting is to learn a few reliable phrases. For example, I'd like to add something. That's a good point. I completely agree. I have a slightly different perspective. Could you elaborate on that? These phrases act like bridges. They help you enter the conversation naturally. And once you've entered the conversation, speaking becomes much easier. Let me share something interesting. The most respected professionals I've worked with weren't always the most talkative people. Often, they were the people who spoke less but added value when they did speak. That's an important lesson. Professional communication isn't about speaking constantly. It's about speaking purposefully. When you have something meaningful to contribute it confidently. Now imagine that during the meeting, someone disagrees with your idea. This is completely normal. Disagreement happens in every workplace. But professional disagreement sounds very different from personal disagreement. Instead of saying, "You're wrong," you might say, "I see your point." That's an interesting perspective. I understand where you're coming from. May I offer another viewpoint? Notice the difference. The goal isn't to win an argument. The goal is to move the conversation forward. That's what professionals do. They focus on solutions, not ego, not pride, not proving who's smarter, just solutions. And that mindset alone can transform the way people perceive you at work. Now let's talk about something that almost everyone finds intimidating at some point in their career. Talking to your manager. I don't care whether you're in your first job or your 20th, whether you're a nurse, an engineer, a teacher, an administrator, or a business owner. At some point, you're going to have conversations that matter. Conversations where you need to ask for something. Conversations where you need to explain a problem. Conversations where you need to admit a mistake. And those conversations can feel uncomfortable. Not because of English, but because of what is at stake. You might worry about being judged. You might worry about sounding unprofessional. You might worry about saying the wrong thing. But here's what I've learned. Professional communication is rarely about finding the perfect words. It's about being honest, respectful, and clear. Let's imagine your workload has become overwhelming. Many people reach a point where they're handling too many responsibilities. The problem is that they stay silent. They keep accepting more tasks, more deadlines, more pressure. And eventually, they become exhausted. Professional communication means speaking up before you reach that point. You might say, "I'm currently managing several high-priority tasks, and I'd like to discuss how we should prioritize them." Notice how different that sounds from complaining. You're not saying, "I can't do this." You're saying, "Let's discuss priorities." That's solution-focused communication, and managers appreciate that. One of the biggest misconceptions people have is that professionalism means pretending everything is fine. It doesn't. Professionalism means communicating challenges effectively, because every workplace has challenges. Every project encounters obstacles. Every team faces difficulties. The question isn't whether problems will occur. The question is how you communicate when they do. Now, let's talk about mistakes. Because mistakes happen to everyone, even highly experienced professionals. In fact, if you've never made a mistake at work, you're probably not taking enough responsibility. The real test of professionalism isn't avoiding mistakes, it's handling them well. I've worked with people who made small mistakes and turned them into huge problems because they tried to hide them. And I've worked with people who made significant mistakes but earned everyone's respect because they handled them honestly. When something goes wrong, one of the most powerful phrases you can use is, "I'd like to bring something to your attention." Simple, professional, direct. Then explain the situation. Explain what happened. Explain what you've already done. And explain your proposed solution. That's the key. Whenever possible, don't bring only a problem. Bring a possible solution too. For example, we encountered an issue with the schedule this morning. I've already contacted the team involved, and I believe we can resolve it by adjusting tomorrow's timeline. Do you hear the difference? The conversation immediately feels constructive. You're not creating panic, you're creating clarity. And clarity is incredibly valuable in professional environments. Now, here's something interesting. Many English learners spend years studying vocabulary, but never study tone. Yet tone is often more important than vocabulary. Think about these two sentences. The first one, "I need this report." The second one, "Could you please send me the report when you have a chance?" The message is similar, but the tone is completely different. Professional English often comes down to these small adjustments, adding, "Could you?" "Would you mind?" "I'd appreciate it if," "whenever you have a moment." These phrases create cooperation rather than pressure, and cooperation is the foundation of good workplace relationships. Let's talk about another situation. Receiving feedback. Most people enjoy praise. Very few people enjoy criticism. Yet feedback is one of the fastest ways to grow professionally. The challenge is that feedback can feel personal. Imagine your manager reviews your work and suggests improvements. Your first reaction might be defensive. That's normal. We're human. Nobody enjoys hearing that something could be better. But successful professionals learn to pause before reacting. Instead of immediately defending yourself, try listening completely. Ask questions, seek understanding. You might say, "Thank you for the feedback. That's helpful. I appreciate you pointing that out. Could you give me an example so I can improve?" These responses demonstrate maturity, and maturity stands out, especially in professional environments. One thing I've noticed throughout my career is that people who grow the fastest aren't always the most talented. They're often the most coachable. They're willing to learn. They're willing to adapt. They're willing to improve. And that attitude becomes obvious through the way they communicate. Now let's shift gears for a moment and talk about confidence. Because confidence is something many English learners struggle with. Perhaps you're listening right now and thinking, "Maya, this all sounds good, but I still feel nervous speaking English." If that's you, I want to share something important. Confidence isn't something you magically wake up with one day. It's something you build, conversation by conversation, meeting by meeting, presentation by presentation, mistake by mistake. Think back to when you first learned to ride a bicycle. Were you confident immediately? Of course not. You probably felt awkward. You probably lost balance. You probably made mistakes. But eventually, through repetition, what once felt difficult became natural. English works the same way. Professional communication works the same way. The people who appear confident today were beginners once too. They simply continued practicing. And over time, confidence followed. That's why I encourage you to focus less on perfection and more on progress. At the end of each workday, ask yourself, did I communicate a little more clearly today? Did I participate a little more confidently today? Did I learn something new today? If the answer is yes, you're moving forward. And that's what matters. Because professional growth rarely happens overnight. It happens gradually, quietly, one conversation at a time, one opportunity at a time, one step at a time. And before you realize it, you'll find yourself speaking in situations that once felt impossible. You'll contribute in meetings. You'll express your ideas. You'll communicate with confidence. Not because you've become perfect, but because you've become comfortable. And comfort is often more valuable than perfection. Now, let's talk about something that most professionals do every single day: emails. I know. The moment I say the word email, some people probably feel a little less excited. Emails don't seem as interesting as meetings. They don't seem as important as presentations. But here's the truth. A large part of your professional reputation is built through written communication. People often form opinions about your professionalism long before they ever meet you in person. And sometimes those opinions come from a simple email. Think about it. Your email reflects how clearly you think, how professionally you communicate, how well you organize information. And surprisingly, writing professional emails is much easier than many people imagine. The biggest mistake people make is trying to sound overly formal. They think professional English means using complicated words. It doesn't. Professional English means being clear. Let's imagine you need information from a colleague. Some people write emails that are so long that the reader gets lost halfway through. Others write messages so short that they sound rude. The goal is balance. You want to sound respectful, professional, and direct. That's why simple phrases are often the most effective. For example, I hope you're doing well. Could you please provide an update regarding the project? Thank you for your assistance. Please let me know if you have any questions. These expressions are used every day in workplaces around the world, not because they're impressive, but because they work. And that's another important lesson. In professional communication, effectiveness is more important than sophistication. The best communicators are often the clearest communicators. Now let's move on to something many professionals eventually face: presentations. Just hearing that word makes some people nervous. Maybe you're one of them. Maybe you've experienced that feeling before. Your heart beats faster. Your palms become sweaty. You suddenly become aware of every word you're about to say. If you've ever felt that way, you're completely normal. Public speaking is one of the most common fears in the world. And interestingly, many people assume that good presenters are naturally confident. But that's usually not true. Most effective presenters prepare thoroughly. Preparation creates confidence. Not talent, not luck, preparation. One thing I've noticed is that strong presenters often use surprisingly simple language. They don't try to sound like a dictionary. They focus on helping their audience understand. Imagine you're presenting a project update. You don't need complex vocabulary. You can say, "Today, I'd like to provide an update on our progress. We've completed the first phase successfully. We encountered a few challenges along the way. Here's what we've learned. Our next steps are as follows." Simple, clear, professional, and most importantly, easy for your audience to follow. Remember, communication isn't about showing people how much you know. It's about helping people understand what you know. That's a huge difference. Now let's talk about workplace relationships. This is an area that many people underestimate. Technical skills matter, experience matters, knowledge matters. But relationships matter too. And communication plays a major role in building those relationships. You don't need to become best friends with everyone you work with. That's not the goal. The goal is to create positive professional relationships. Relationships built on trust, respect, reliability. And one of the easiest ways to do that is through small, everyday conversations. Sometimes people dismiss small talk as unimportant, but small talk serves a purpose. It helps people feel comfortable. It helps build connections. It creates familiarity. Imagine you're waiting for a meeting to begin. Instead of sitting in silence, someone says, "How has your week been? Did you have a good weekend? How's everything going? These questions aren't designed to start deep philosophical discussions. They're simply ways of building rapport, and rapport is valuable because people are more likely to collaborate effectively when they feel comfortable with one another. Now, I want to share something that took me years to understand. Being professional doesn't mean being distant. Some people think professionalism requires them to become cold and formal, but that's not true. You can be professional and warm, professional and friendly, professional and approachable. In fact, those qualities often make communication more effective. People generally prefer working with individuals who are respectful, positive, and approachable. And those qualities aren't advanced English skills, they're human skills. Let's talk about networking for a moment. Sometimes the word networking sounds intimidating. People imagine crowded conferences and awkward conversations. But networking is simply building professional relationships. That's all it is. And one of the easiest ways to network is to become genuinely curious about other people. Ask questions, listen carefully, show interest. People appreciate being heard, and when they feel heard, conversations become much easier. One simple professional question is, what projects are you working on these days? It's open-ended. It invites conversation, and it shows interest without being intrusive. Over time, small conversations can lead to valuable professional relationships, and those relationships often create opportunities that technical skills alone cannot. Now let's discuss something that almost every professional encounters eventually: workplace conflict. Let's be honest, whenever people work together, disagreements happen. Different personalities, different priorities, different opinions. Conflict is normal. The key is handling it professionally. One thing I've learned is that professional conflict is rarely about winning, it's about solving problems. Imagine you disagree with a colleague. Instead of saying, "You're wrong," try saying, "I see the situation differently. Let's explore both perspectives. Can we find a solution that works for everyone involved?" Notice how these phrases reduce tension. They keep the conversation productive. They focus attention on the issue rather than the individual. And that's incredibly important, because once conversations become personal, productive communication becomes much harder. Professional communicators focus on facts. They focus on solutions. They focus on outcomes. And that mindset can transform difficult conversations. Now, as we're moving toward the end of today's episode, I want you to think about something. Imagine the version of yourself 1 year from now, a version of yourself who communicates confidently at work, a version of yourself who participates in meetings without fear, who speaks clearly, who writes professional emails, who expresses ideas confidently, who handles challenges calmly. That version of you is not created in a single day. It's created through consistent practice. Every conversation matters. Every email matters. Every opportunity to communicate matters. And the beautiful thing is that improvement doesn't require perfection. It simply requires persistence. You don't need to speak perfect English tomorrow. You just need to speak slightly better English than you spoke yesterday. And if you keep doing that, week after week, month after month, the progress becomes extraordinary. Because confidence grows, skills grow, opportunities grow. And before long, you'll realize that English is no longer something you're struggling to learn. It's simply something you're using, naturally, comfortably, professionally. And that's the goal. Not perfect English, not flawless grammar, not a perfect accent. Communication, connection, confidence. That's what truly matters. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I hope this episode helped you feel more confident about using English in professional environments. Remember, every expert was once a beginner. Every confident speaker once felt nervous. And every professional communicator improved through practice. Keep learning, keep speaking, and most importantly, keep believing in your ability to improve. I'm Maya, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care and have a wonderful day.